The first time I met an alien queen. She was chained to a wall and I was bleeding into my own boots, and neither of us yet knew that a torn flight jacket would end the war. My name is Eli Foul Tip Vega. Before the sky turned red and the horn ships came down through it, I threw a curveball for the Albuquerque Isotopes and washed out in 3 seasons because I could not, for love or money, find the strike zone. They said I had the arm of a god and the aim of a drunk uncle. They were not entirely wrong. What they did not know, what nobody knew, including me, was that the reason I could not throw a strike was the same reason I could fly a getter jet. My reflexes did not run on conscious thought. They ran on something older, something stubborn. Something that looked at a moving target and said, "Not there, not yet, wait," and then put the ball or the jet exactly where the target was about to be, half a second before the target itself knew. Dr. Copernicus said I had predictive proprioception. Hayato said I was a freak. Ryo said I was a baseball player and to please, for the love of God, stop humming during launch. I hummed because Tomas had hummed. Tomas Tomai, the man whose seat I was sitting in, the man whose flight jacket I wore every time I climbed into Poseidon's cockpit, had hummed an old song his mother used to sing to him in a fishing village on the Pacific coast of Honduras. He'd been dead 9 months when I got the call from Copernicus. The jacket still smelled faintly of his cigarettes. I never washed it. The crew teased me about it. I let them. It was the closest thing to a prayer I had. You have to understand what the war was like in those years to understand why a jacket mattered. The pandemonium had come down through the high atmosphere on a Tuesday in March, 4 years before the day I am telling you about, and from that Tuesday onward there had not been a single 24-hour stretch in which someone, somewhere on Earth, was not dying because of them. They did not declare war. They did not negotiate. They appeared in the sky over Manila and they put a mecha oni down through the roof of a hospital. And when the hospital was finished burning, they put another one down through a stadium, and another through a power plant. And by the end of the week, the world had stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. Within a month, there were 12 cities gone. Within 6 months, there were 80. We learned slowly that they were not interested in our cities. They were interested in the cities, the way a man kicking over an anthill is interested in the ants. They wanted us to be busy with our dead, while they pursued whatever they had actually come for. And what they had actually come for was a building in California with Dr. Copernicus's name on the door. Copernicus had finished the Omicron 3 months before the invasion. He had not announced it. He had not published. He had not told anyone outside a circle of 9 people, all of whom were in the building with the reactor. And still, somehow, the pandemonium had known. They had crossed the heliopause specifically for it. They had built a war on top of it. We did not know in those first months what they wanted. We assumed they wanted Earth. By the end of the first year, when we noticed the pattern of their strikes, always the same vector, always the same approach corridors, always converging on a stretch of California coastline they did not yet have the strength to take, we understood. They wanted the reactor. The cities were tactics. The slaughter was tactics. We were not the enemy. We were the moat. That was the world Tomas Tomai flew in. That was the world I inherited. That morning, the morning the Queen came into my life and tried to leave it again with my blood on her hands, the alarm sounded at Fort Wentty. Sky tankers away. Dragon formation, switch on. Ryo's voice in my helmet, hoarse from sleep and too much coffee. Foul tip, you with us? Born ready, Captain. Liar. Optimist. We launched out of the Pacific base in a triple plume of white fire, Ryo and Dragon, Hayato and Liger, me and Poseidon, and the 3 of us bent the sky into a curve that no civilian aircraft would ever be allowed to fly. Below us the ocean was the color of a bruise. Above us, the pandemonium had opened a hole in the cloud layer, and a mecha oni was coming through it. You have not seen a mecha oni until you have seen one in person. The pictures don't do it justice. The pictures make them look like statues. In person, they move like animals, like something that should not be the size of a building but is, and knows it and resents it. Horns the length of city buses. A face stamped into the chest plate like a death mask. Arms that hung wrong, too long, dragging clouds of contrail behind them as the thing fell. The pandemonium build their war machines in the shape of the demons from their own folklore. We did not understand this at first. We thought they were trying to scare us. Later, we learned they were trying to scare themselves into being brave. Dragon Liger Poseidon, Ryle said, in that flat liturgical voice he used when he was scared. Formation switch on. I felt Poseidon's hull shudder. The three jets folded into each other along the seam lines Copernicus had drilled into us 1,000 times in simulation. And where there had been 3 machines, there was now one Starvenger, 26 meters of welded grief and engineering. And I was its right hand, its sea arm, the one that punched things that lived underwater and sometimes, when the day was bad, things that lived in the sky. The Mecha Oni landed in the ocean about 3 kilometers off our port side, and the wave it threw up was tall enough to wet our knees. It rose out of the spray with its horns steaming. Foul tip, Hayato said, pitcher's mound. It was our code. Hayato was the brain, Ryo was the heart, and I was the arm. Pitcher's mound meant, do the thing only you can do. I closed my eyes for half a second. I felt the Mecha Oni's mass through the soles of my feet. Starvenger's gyros translated everything into the pilots' bodies, so we walked the way the robot walked, breathed the way it breathed. I felt the shift of weight in its left leg. I felt the lean of its shoulders. I felt the place its head was about to be. I did not aim at where it was. I aimed at where it was going. Poseidon Cannon, I said, because Tomas used to call his shots out loud, and I had inherited the habit along with the jacket. Tracking fire. The cannon coughed. A blue arc of compressed plasma left Starvenger's right forearm and crossed the 3 kilometers of salt water in less than a heartbeat. And the Mecha Oni's horned head was not where the head had been but where the head was going, and the plasma met it there, and the head came apart in a brief and beautiful flower of orange light. The body kept walking for 2 more steps before it understood it was dead. Then it fell, and the ocean ate it, and the steam rose for a long time afterward. Strike, Ryo said. Looking, I said. Hayato made the sound that, in Hayato, passed for a laugh. We thought it was over. We thought, the way you always think when you are young and stupid and have just one, that this was the shape of the day. A Mecha Oni came down. A Mecha Oni went away. Sky Tanker's home. Coffee. Tomas's jacket on the back of my chair in the ready room. The smell of his cigarettes. It was not the shape of the day. The Mecha Oni had been a distraction. While we were 3 kilometers offshore taking a victory lap, the Science Fortress Island, the Pandemonium's mobile command platform, a thing the size of Manhattan that walked on the seabed and surfaced for war, was rising out of the trench 40 kilometers behind us. And from its deck, a flight of smaller machines was screaming inland toward the Omnicron generator. The Omnicron was the reason for all of this. Copernicus had built it in 2030, 1 out of 3 things that should not have worked together: a Bose-Einstein condensate, a recursively folded magnetic bottle, and what he would only ever describe as a guess. It produced more energy than it consumed. It violated, in spirit if not in letter, the second law of thermodynamics. The Pandemonium had detected it from across the heliopause, the way a shark detects blood, and they had come for it. And they had been coming for it for 4 years. And Earth had held them off because of 3 jets, 3 pilots, and 1 old man who refused to explain how his reactor worked even to the people who flew the robot that protected it. If they ever got the Omnicron, the Pandemonium would not need Earth. They would crack the sun for fuel and move on. We were a speed bump on the way to a snack. Tankers, Ryo snapped, redirect the base. The base, go. We went. We left the dead Mecha Oni steaming in the sea behind us, and we burned the fuel we should have saved for re-entry. and we made it back to the base in 8 minutes flat, and we were 4 minutes too late. The Omnicron was still there. Copernicus was still there, white-haired and shaking, but alive. The base was on fire in 3 places, but the fire was being put out. What the pandemonium had taken was something else. Something we had not known they wanted. Something I had not known existed. In the deepest sub-basement of the base, behind a door I had walked past every day for 9 months without knowing what was behind it, there had been a prisoner. A pandemonium prisoner. A young one, female, captured in the 2nd year of the war from a downed transport, and kept in a cell whose existence was classified above my clearance. Her name was Vasiri. The pandemonium had come for her, not for the reactor, for her. And they had not gotten her. Because in the chaos of the raid, in the 8 minutes between when their boarders breached the sub-basement and when our reinforcements arrived, she had killed 3 of her own people with her bare hands, broken her own chains using a method that involved dislocating both her wrists, and crawled into a ventilation shaft. The shaft led, eventually, to the hangar where I parked Poseidon. She was found there 4 hours later by a janitor named Mr. Park, curled around the landing strut of my jet, bleeding from both wrists, unconscious. Mr. Park, who had survived the Korean War and seen worse, did not scream. He covered her with the nearest piece of cloth he could find, which happened to be Tomas's flight jacket, hung on the back of my pre-flight chair, and called for a medic. By the time I got down to the hangar, she had been moved to medbay, and the jacket was a pile of bloody canvas on the concrete floor. I picked it up. I did not yet know whose blood was on it. I assumed it was a crew member's. I held it the way you hold a flag at a funeral. Copernicus found me there. Vega, he said. He said my surname the way he said it when he was about to ask me to do something he did not want to ask. Come with me. I came. I brought the jacket. He took me to the medbay. He stopped me at the door. He said, "What I am about to show you is classified at a level that does not have a number. If you tell anyone, I will deny it, and then I will discharge you, and then I will hire you back under a different name, and we will continue. Do you understand?" "No," I said. "Good, come in." Vasiri was strapped to a med bench with her wrists in foam splints and her horns wrapped in gauze. The horns were the first thing I noticed. They were smaller than the horns on the Mecha Oni, less ridged, more elegant. They curved back from her temples in a single sweep, almost like an animal's, almost beautiful. Her skin was the color of wet slate. Her eyes, when they opened, were the color of new copper, and they fixed on me with an expression I had only ever seen on the faces of horses at the slaughterhouse my uncle had worked at when I was 9. Not fear, calculation, through fear. "Lieutenant Vega," Copernicus said, "meet the heir presumptive to the 6th house of the Pandemonium Imperium, or, as her uncle the Emperor calls her, the Inconvenience." "Her uncle," I said. "Burai." "The Burai." "The same." I sat down on a stool because my knees had decided, without consulting me, that they no longer wanted to support my weight. Copernicus told me the rest in short sentences. The Pandemonium were not a single people. They were a federation of houses, 12 of them, each ruled by a queen or a king who answered to the emperor only in matters of war. The 6th house, Vasiri's house, had voted 3 years ago against the invasion of Earth. They had argued that the Omnicron could be obtained by trade rather than by extermination. They had been outvoted. Vasiri's mother, the 6th queen, had refused to send her house's fleet. Burai had her assassinated and replaced her with a cousin. Vasiri, the heir, had been 17 at the time. She had escaped on a smuggler's transport, intending to defect, intending to come to Earth and offer terms. The smuggler had sold her out. We had shot down the transport thinking it was a scout. We had pulled her from the wreckage thinking she was an intelligence asset. We had kept her in a cell for 2 years because Copernicus had not been able to verify her story and could not afford to be wrong. Now Burai had come for her. Now he knew where she was. "Why?" I said. If she defected, why does he want her back? He could just leave her here. We're not exactly being kind hosts. Copernicus looked at Vasiri. Vasiri looked at me. Her copper eyes did not blink. She said, in English so accented it sounded like wind through a broken window, "Because if I die in the hands of the human, my house cannot avenge. If I die in the hands of my uncle, my house must avenge, but on you. He will say you killed me. He will use my body to bind the sixth house to the war. He needs me dead in a way that points at Earth." She said it the way you would read the weather report. "Okay," I said. I was still holding Tomas's jacket. I did not know what else to do with my hands. "Okay, so we protect you." "You hide me," she said, "until the conclave, 61 of your days. If I appear at the conclave alive before my house with proof of my uncle's perfidy, the sixth house withdraws from the war. The third and the ninth will follow. Burai loses his coalition. The invasion ends. 61 days. 61 days. What's the proof?" She was quiet, then she said, "My mother's signet. Burai keeps it in his throne room on the science fortress." Copernicus closed his eyes. "Vega," he said, "get out, get a meal, don't speak to anyone, come back in 2 hours." I got out. I walked. I ate a sandwich I do not remember eating. I went back to my bunk and I sat on the floor with Tomas's bloody jacket in my lap and I tried and failed to think. I came back in 2 hours. Copernicus was waiting outside the medbay. He said, "We're going to extract the signet." "Wait." "Starvinger. The signet is in a vault on the upper deck of the Science Fortress Island. We have a window. The conclave is in 59 days. The fortress surfaces every 12 days to vent atmosphere. Next surface is in 3 days. Hayato has done the math. We can put Starvinger on the deck for 40 seconds before the defenses recover. 40 seconds is enough for one of you, one, to leave the cockpit, breach the vault, retrieve the signet and return. One of us. You. Why me?" He looked at me with the kind of tiredness old men have when they have already had every conversation they are about to have. "Because Ryo can't leave Dragon. Dragon is the heart. If he leaves, the formation breaks. Because Hayato can't run his knee. Because you can throw a curveball through the eye of a needle from 50 feet away, and the vault has an eye of a needle problem. There's no other reason. There's one other reason." "What?" "She asked for you." I did not ask why. I did not want to know. I was 28 years old and I had been a baseball player, and now I was going to walk into the throne room of an alien emperor and steal a dead queen's ring because her daughter, who had bled on my dead friend's jacket, had asked for me by name. "Okay," I said. 3 days later, we surfaced. The Science Fortress Island came up out of the Marianas Trench at 03:11 local time, and at 03:12 Starvinger was on its deck, and at 03:12 in 6 seconds I was out of Poseidon's cockpit in a vacuum suit that smelled, faintly, of someone else's sweat, with Tomas's jacket folded inside the chest plate against my heart, because I was not going to leave it behind, not today. The deck of the fortress was the color of dried blood. It was warm under my boots. It was breathing. I could feel it through the soles of the suit, a slow swell and contraction, as if the whole island were a single enormous animal asleep with its mouth open. Above us, the sky was the wrong color. Below us, somewhere in the fortress's belly, 10,000 pandemonium were just realizing they had visitors. The smell came through my air filter despite the seal. Hayato had warned me about this in briefing, that the pandemonium ships carried an atmosphere with a high concentration of something he called methylated sulfide, and that no filter we had could quite shut it out. He had not warned me what it would do to my head. It smelled like burning hair. It smelled like the back room of a butcher shop. It smelled somehow like grief, which I knew was impossible, because grief is not a smell, but standing on the deck of that thing with the wrong-colored sky above me, I would have argued the point with anyone. The pandemonium lived inside that smell. They built their world out of it. I understood, briefly, and with a clarity that frightened me, that there were aspects of being them that I would never be able to imagine. 38 seconds, Hayato said in my ear. I ran. The vault was where Vasiri had said it would be. The lock was where she had said it would be. The eye of a needle problem was real. A 4-centimeter aperture, recessed 3 meters into a steel wall, that had to receive a precisely shaped magnetic key at a precisely correct angle from a precisely correct distance, or it would not open and would, in fact, set off an alarm that would end us all. I had the key in my left hand. I had thrown 10,000 curveballs in my life. I closed my eyes for half a second. I felt the wall. I felt the aperture. I felt where the key needed to be. I threw. The key went into the aperture the way a key goes into a lock when a locksmith does it. Except a locksmith uses his hands, and I had used my arm from 3 meters away. And the lock turned, and the vault opened, and inside the vault was a ring. It was small. It was the color of new copper. It was, I realized later, the same color as Vasiri's eyes. I took it. 20 seconds, Hayato said. I turned to run. That was when I saw her. Not Vasiri, the other one, the one chained to the wall. She was older than Vasiri, late 40s maybe, by human reckoning. Her horns were longer. Her wrists were chained above her head, and her feet did not quite touch the floor. Her skin was the color of slate, and her eyes, when they opened, were copper, and she looked at me the way Vasiri had looked at me, and I knew, with the kind of certainty that does not require thought, who she was. The 6th queen, Vasiri's mother, not assassinated, held. Burai had not killed her. He had kept her, the way Copernicus had kept Vasiri, because a dead queen is a martyr but a living one is a hostage, and Burai needed leverage on his own house. 18 seconds, Hayato said. I had a choice. I had 18 seconds and a choice. The mission was the signet. The signet was in my hand. If I left now, I made it back to Stavanger with 3 seconds to spare. If I freed the queen, if I broke chains I did not have the tools to break. In a vault I did not have the time to be in. I did not make it back. Stavanger left without me. The pandemonium found me. I died slowly, and Earth lost its right arm for as long as it took to train another pilot, which was a long time. And during that time the pandemonium took the Omicron, and Earth ended. The math was simple. The math was very, very simple. I looked at the 6th queen. She did not ask me for anything. She did not beg. She did not even speak. She just looked at me with her daughter's eyes and waited to see what kind of animal I was. Foul tip, Ryo said. What are you doing? Pitcher's mound, I said. Foul tip, no. Hayato, the chain, top right hook anchor. I need it gone. Silence, then, I can see it on your suit cam, stand back. I stood back. Hayato did something with Liger's targeting laser through a window that should not have allowed targeting lasers through it, and the top right hook anchor in the queen's chain glowed white-hot for half a second and parted. The queen fell. I caught her. She weighed nothing. She had not eaten in weeks, maybe months, and she was lighter than the jacket I carried against my chest. 12 seconds, Hayato said. He sounded like a man watching a building burn down with his children inside it. I ran with her. I did not run well. She was lighter than I expected and heavier than I could handle, and my legs were not made for this. And the deck of the fortress was breathing under my boots, and somewhere below us alarms had started, and somewhere ahead of us Stavanger was waiting with its chest open and its window closing. At 8 seconds, the pandemonium opened fire from a turret on the upper deck. The first round hit the queen in the back. I felt it go through her. I felt it come out her chest. I felt it enter my shoulder, just under the collarbone, and exit somewhere behind me. And I kept running because if I stopped I died, and she died, and Earth died. And there was a part of me that I did not know existed until that moment that simply refused absolutely, to let any of those things happen. At 4 seconds, I reached Starvinger's open chest cavity, and I threw the queen ahead of me into it, the way Tomas used to throw me a beer across the ready room. Underhand, with a flick of the wrist, and she landed inside, and I followed her in, and the cavity closed, and we were rising. At 0 seconds, the fortress's main batteries fired into the space we had just left. We made it home. The 6th queen did not. She died on the way back. She died with her head in her daughter's lap, in the cargo bay of a transport that met us at the rendezvous, and she said something to Vasiri in a language I did not understand, and Vasiri held her until she was cold, and then Vasiri stood up and walked over to where I was sitting against a bulkhead bleeding into my own boots, and she knelt in front of me, and she took Tomas's jacket out of my chest plate, where I had been keeping it through all of this. And she pressed it against the hole in my shoulder, and she said, "Live, Lieutenant Vega, you have done enough, live." I lived. I do not remember the next 2 days. I remember waking up in the medbay with my shoulder in a sling, and the jacket folded on the chair next to my bed, washed, which it had never been before, the bloodstains faded but not gone. I remember Copernicus standing in the doorway with his hands behind his back, looking at me the way fathers look at sons who have done something stupid and survived it. "Vega," he said. "Sir, that was not the mission." "No, sir." "You disobeyed a direct order." "Yes, sir." "You compromised the extraction." "Yes, sir." "You will be commended for it as soon as I can find a category that fits, which may take me several months. Until then, you are off rotation." "Yes, sir." He paused in the doorway. He looked at the jacket. He said, "She washed it herself, the princess. She would not let the orderlies touch it. She said it was a debt bond, and only she could discharge the cleaning." "Debt bond?" "It's a pandemonium custom. I'm still learning. Apparently, when a member of the warrior caste sheds blood to save a member of a royal house, the blood goes onto the cloth of the warrior, and the cloth then belongs, in some legal sense I do not understand, to the royal house. She has been very firm about this. My jacket belongs to her. In some legal sense." I looked at the jacket on the chair. It looked the same. It smelled different soap instead of Tomas's cigarettes. I felt for a moment that something had been taken from me. Then I felt for a longer moment that something had been given. "Where is she?" I said. "Preparing for the conclave. It is in 54 days. She would like to see you when you are well." "Tell her I'm well." "Vega, you are not." "Tell her I'm well, sir." He told her I was well. She came down to the medbay an hour later. She was wearing a black robe with a hood, and underneath the hood her horns were wrapped in gold wire, which I would later learn was the mourning tradition of the 6th house. She sat on the chair next to my bed. She picked up the jacket. She held it in her lap. She said, "Eli." It was the first time she had used my first name. It came out of her mouth the way a stone comes out of a slingshot, fast, unfamiliar, aimed. "Vasiri, I'm going to ask you something. You may say no. If you say no, I will not ask again, and we will not speak of it." "Okay." "I am going to the conclave in 54 days. I am going alone, my house's tradition. I will stand before the 12 thrones, and I will accuse my uncle of my mother's murder, and I will produce her signet, and I will demand his abdication. He will refuse. He will challenge me to single combat, which is also tradition. I will fight him. He is 200 years old, and he has not lost a single combat in 80 years. I will probably die." "Okay." "When I die, if I die, the war does not end. The 6th house will withdraw, yes, but the 3rd and the 9th will not follow without proof of my uncle's perfidy, and the proof is me, standing, accusing, living." "Okay. What I am asking you is this. When I go into the chamber, I will wear my mother's signet on my right hand. I will carry my mother's blade in my left. On my body I will wear—" She stopped. She looked at the jacket in her lap. On my body I will wear something of yours, with your permission. Because in the language of my people, a covering given freely by an enemy who has bled for you is the highest possible declaration of a debt that cannot be repaid, and a queen who walks into the conclave wearing such a covering is a queen who has been seen by an outsider as worthy of his blood. It is a thing my uncle cannot deny. It is a thing the third and the ninth will see. It is, perhaps, a thing that does not require me to win the fight, only to wear the cloth. She was looking at the jacket. You want to wear Tomas's jacket to your uncle's throne room? Yes. To accuse him? Yes. In front of the 12 thrones? Yes. I looked at the jacket. I thought about Tomas. I thought about his mother's song, hummed in a fishing village I had never seen. I thought about how Tomas had died, strafed out of the sky over the Sea of Japan by a Mecha Oni's shoulder cannon, and how I had inherited his seat and his songs and his canvas. I thought about what he would have said. He would have said, "It's a jacket, Eli, give the girl the jacket." "It's yours," I said. "It was already yours, take it." She did not cry, she did not say thank you. She picked up the jacket and she folded it the way her mother had probably folded ceremonial cloth 1,000 times in her life, and she stood up, and she bowed once, a small bow, formal, and she left. I did not see her again for 53 days. In those 53 days a number of things happened. The war did not stop. Mecha Oni continued to fall out of the sky. Starvenger continued to launch. I came back on rotation on day 20 against medical advice, and I flew with my left arm in a sling and my right arm doing the work of two, and I was not as good as I had been, but I was good enough. Ryo did not comment on my reduced range. Hayato did not comment on my reduced range. They simply adjusted, the way teammates adjust, and we kept the pandemonium off the Omnicron for another 53 days. I saw Vasiri, occasionally, on the screens in the briefing room. Copernicus had given her a small office on the upper level, a converted record storage closet with a window that looked out at the sea, and she spent most of her days there with a tablet and a translator and a stack of paper documents she had brought with her out of the cell, smuggled there over 2 years by a guard whose name she would not speak. She was building her case. She was rehearsing, in a language I could not parse, the words she would say in the Hall of 12 Thrones. Sometimes I would pass the office on the way to the mess, and she would be standing in the middle of the room with her hands at her sides, eyes closed, speaking to no one. Sometimes she would be sitting at the desk with the jacket in her lap, not doing anything with it, just having her hands on it the way a person rests their hands on a sleeping animal. I did not go in. She did not invite me. We were, both of us, doing the work we had to do, and we both understood without saying so that the work would be harder if we spent time together. There would be time afterward, or there would not be. Either way, the next 53 days were not for us. I will admit something here, because the story does not work without it. I thought about her constantly. I thought about her when I was in Poseidon's cockpit, and I should have been thinking about Mecha Oni. I thought about her when I was eating, when I was sleeping, when I was sitting at Tomas's old place at the mess table with Tomas's chair empty next to me, and Tomas's coffee mug on the table where he had left it. I thought about her copper eyes and her wrapped horns, and the way she had said the word "live" in the cargo bay of the transport with my dead friend's jacket pressed against the hole in my shoulder. I thought about the fact that she was the daughter of a queen I had carried briefly in my arms, and that the queen had died with her head in her daughter's lap, and that I had been there for both halves of that, and that there was no word in English for what that made me to her, or her to me. I did not have a word. I do not think there is a word. We did the work. On day 41, Burai sent a personal transmission. He did it on every broadcast frequency we had, which meant every television on Earth carried his face for 32 minutes. He stood on the deck of his science fortress with his horns oiled and his armor polished, and he announced that his niece, the traitor Vasiri, was returning to the pandemonium homeworld to face her trial for the murder of her mother, and that any Earth nation harboring her was guilty of complicity, and that the sixth house had asked him personally to handle the matter, which was a lie so transparent that even the pandemonium watching it must have rolled their eyes. He also announced, at the end of the broadcast, that he was bringing his flagship out of the trench in 48 hours to escort her home. We watched the broadcast in the briefing room, Ryo, Hayato, Copernicus, me, and Vasiri, who had come down from her office for the first time in a week. She watched her uncle's face on the screen with no expression at all. When the transmission ended, she said, in a voice so quiet I almost did not hear it, "He has aged. He looks like my grandfather now." Then she stood up and she walked back to her office, and she did not come out for the next 12 days. We knew what the broadcast meant. He was coming for the Omicron. He was using the trial as cover. Vasiri would be killed on the homeworld. The sixth house would have no proof. The war would continue, and meanwhile his flagship would be in our skies with its main batteries pointed at our reactor. Copernicus stayed up for 3 nights running. He did not tell us his plan. He told us only that Stavanger would not be engaging the flagship. We would be engaging the escort. The flagship was Vasiri's problem. "What's Vasiri's plan?" Hayato said. "Vasiri's plan," Copernicus said, "is to walk onto the flagship at the rendezvous in 2 days, accept Burai's escort, ride to the homeworld with him, and present herself at the conclave wearing a jacket. That's it. That's it. That's a terrible plan. It is the plan we have." I did not say anything. I went down to the hangar and I sat next to Poseidon, and I tried to imagine Tomas's jacket walking into a throne room on the shoulders of a girl whose mother had died in my arms, and I could not, and I sat there for a long time, and eventually I went to bed. The next morning I went up to her office. I knocked. She opened the door. She was wearing the jacket over her own clothes, indoors in the heat of a Pacific summer, sleeves rolled up because they were too long. She looked at me. I looked at her. I said, "I came to say goodbye in case I don't get to." She said, "I came to the same conclusion an hour ago. I was going to find you." We sat down in her office. There were no chairs for visitors, so I sat on the floor against the wall and she sat at her desk, and we did not speak for a while. Then she told me about her mother. She told me about the fishing the sixth house did on a coast on her homeworld that she said reminded her, from photographs, of Honduras. She told me about a song her mother used to hum when Vasiri was small. Not the words, which she could not bring herself to say in English, but the rhythm of it, which she tapped out on the surface of the desk with one finger, and which sounded, when she tapped it, almost exactly like the rhythm of the song Tomas used to hum in Poseidon's cockpit before launch. I did not tell her this. I did not want to give her a reason to cry. But I sat against the wall, and I listened to her tap out a song that was not Tomas's song and was, somehow, the same song. And I understood something about the war that I had not understood before, which is that the pandemonium and we were not as different as we had been told, and that the people who had decided we should be different had not bothered to ask the people who hummed songs to their children in fishing villages. After a while she stopped tapping. She said, "If I do not come back, I want you to know that the jacket is buried with me. I will not let it be taken. I have arranged it." "Okay. And I want you to know that," she stopped. She started again. "I want you to know that when my mother died in my lap, she said something, in our language. She said the human carried me. Tell him I felt his arms. Tell him they were warm." I put my hands over my face. I sat against the wall in her office, and I put my hands over my face, and I did not cry, because I had decided years ago that I did not cry at work, but I came as close as I had come in a long time. Vasiri did not say anything else. She let me have the silence. After a while I stood up. I said, "Pitcher's mound." She said, "Pitcher's mound." I left. On day 53, I saw her one more time. She came down to the hangar an hour before the rendezvous. She was wearing her ceremonial armor, black, lacquered, the color of obsidian, and over the armor she was wearing Tomas's jacket. It did not fit. It was too big in the shoulders and too short in the sleeves, and the canvas looked absurd over the obsidian. And she looked for a moment like a child, wearing her father's coat to a wedding. Then she straightened up, and she did not look like a child anymore. Lieutenant Vega. Your Majesty. Eli. Vasiri. If I survive, I will return your jacket. If I do not survive, I have left instructions. It will be returned regardless. Keep it. It is not mine to keep. It is yours, and it is the dead pilot's, and it is your mother's god's, and I am only borrowing it. I did not know what to say to that. She said Pitcher's Mound. I had told her about the phrase in the medbay in one of the conversations I do not remember well. She had remembered it. Pitcher's Mound, I said. She put her hand on my chest briefly, over the place where the round had gone through my shoulder. Then she turned, and she walked out of the hangar, and an hour later I watched her on a screen as she walked alone, in my dead friend's jacket, up the ramp of the Pandemonium flagship to greet her uncle. What happened next, I learned in pieces over the following weeks, from a combination of intercepts, debriefs, and Vasiri's own account when she finally returned. The flagship took her to the homeworld. The voyage took 11 days, which is roughly 4 times faster than human ships of comparable mass can manage. And for 11 days, Vasiri lived in a guest suite with no locks on the doors and ate food prepared by chefs who had been told, explicitly, not to poison her. Burai visited her once. He sat across from her at dinner on the 3rd night, and he told her that he had loved her mother in his way, and that her mother had forced his hand by refusing to compromise on the matter of the Omicron, and that he hoped Vasiri would not force his hand the same way. Vasiri ate her dinner and said nothing. She was wearing the jacket. He did not comment on the jacket, which she found interesting, because in his place she would have demanded an explanation. She concluded, by the end of dinner, that he had not yet realized what the jacket was. This was his first mistake. The flagship arrived at the homeworld on day 11. Vasiri was escorted from the ship by 12 honor guards in ceremonial armor, through streets that had been cleared of onlookers, into a vehicle that took her directly to the Hall of 12 Thrones. The hall is the oldest building in the Pandemonium Imperium. It is older by several thousand years than the Imperium itself. It is older than the houses. It is older, possibly, than the species. The Pandemonium built their civilization around it the way a pearl forms around a piece of grit. To kill a queen inside the hall is forbidden by laws that predate writing. Vasiri walked in alone, as tradition required. She wore her mother's blade in her left hand and her mother's signet on her right hand, and on her body she wore a torn, oil-stained, twice-bloodied human flight jacket that did not fit her, that smelled of a stranger's cigarettes, that bore a name patch reading TOMEI in faded white thread. The 12 Thrones saw her. The 12 Thrones saw the jacket. There was a silence. It lasted, by Vasiri's count, almost a full minute. In the Hall of 12 Thrones, a minute of silence is a thing that has historical consequences. Wars have been started by shorter silences. Wars have been ended by them too. The third queen, old, blind, a woman who had not spoken in court for 30 years, stood up. She did not need to see the jacket. Someone next to her had described it. She said one sentence. The sentence was roughly translated, "The child has been bled for. The child is owed." The 9th king stood up. He said nothing. The standing was enough. The 6th house's seat was empty. Vasiri walked to it. The walk took her past Burai's throne. He watched her pass. He did not yet understand. She sat down. She placed her mother's signet on the armrest. She accused her uncle of the murder of the 6th queen. She produced witnesses, a smuggler who had been bribed, a guard who had been silenced, a chamberlain who had been turned, and she produced the signet, which Burai had been keeping in a vault until I, 3 months earlier, had thrown a key through an aperture and taken it. Burai watched the proceedings with an expression that began as amused tolerance and ended, by the time the Chamberlain testified, as the kind of stillness that men of his rank get when they are recalculating their entire afternoon. He had not expected the signet. He had not expected the Chamberlain. He had certainly not expected the third queen to be standing. When the accusations were complete, he laughed. He stood up. He drew his blade. He challenged her to single combat as tradition required. It was, in his mind, still salvageable. He had not lost a single combat in 80 years, and she was a girl with a borrowed blade and a coat that did not fit. Vasiri accepted. They fought in the Hall of 12 Thrones, before the 12 Thrones, with the 12 houses watching. He was 200 years old, and he had not lost a fight in 80 years. She was 23 by Earth's count, and she had been a prisoner for 2 of those years, and she was wearing a jacket that did not fit. The fight lasted 4 passes. On the first pass he cut her thigh, a long shallow cut, more theater than damage, intended to make her bleed visibly so the watching houses would see her bleed and adjust their expectations. On the second pass he cut her side deeper this time, intended to slow her. On the third pass he cut her cheek, the cut of a teacher correcting a student, almost casual, and Vasiri later told me she felt, on the third pass, the way she had felt when she was 8 years old and her uncle had caught her stealing fruit from the orchard and had cut a piece of her hair as punishment. She did not retreat on the third pass. She stepped into him. She lost the fight. Of course she lost the fight. On the fourth pass he drove his blade through the canvas of Tomas's jacket and into her chest just below the collarbone, in almost exactly the place the pandemonium turret round had gone through me on the deck of the Science Fortress 3 months earlier. She fell. He stood over her. He raised his blade for the killing stroke. He looked at the 12 thrones and he smiled, the way men smile when they have just one. And then, and this is the part of the story I have heard 100 times and still cannot quite imagine, the third queen, blind and old, stood up again and said, "Stop." Burai did not stop. He brought the blade down. The 9th king stood up. He said, "Stop." The blade stopped, because the 9th king was, by tradition, the only person other than the emperor who could halt a single combat with a word. Burai held the blade an inch above his niece's throat. He looked at the 9th king. The 9th king looked back at him with the kind of patience that men have when they have been waiting a very long time for a particular thing to happen, and the thing is finally happening. The 4th queen stood up. The 7th king stood up. The 10th queen stood up. By the time 5 of the 12 thrones were standing, Burai had to stop, because the law of the pandemonium is that a single combat may be halted by the standing of 5 thrones, and the thrones were standing, and they were standing because of the jacket. Because in the Hall of 12 Thrones, on the chest of a girl bleeding out on the marble, was a canvas patch that said Tomei, and the canvas was twice bloodied. Once with an outsider's blood, 3 months old, and once with her own, fresh. And in the language of the pandemonium, this is not a thing that can be ignored. A queen who walks into a conclave wearing a covering given freely by a warrior of an enemy people who has bled for her, and who then bleeds onto that same covering during a single combat, is a queen who has been seen, twice, as worthy of blood. By pandemonium law, she cannot be killed by her own people while she still wears that cloth. The cloth itself protects her. The cloth itself accuses her killer. If Burai killed her, the 12 houses would have to depose him. If he did not kill her, she lived, and if she lived, she won. He looked at the jacket, he looked at the thrones. He looked at the 12 houses watching him through their proxies, and he understood what I, half a galaxy away, had not understood when I gave the jacket to Vasiri 3 months earlier in a medbay on the Pacific coast. He had been outmaneuvered by a piece of canvas. He lowered his blade. He turned away. He spoke a sentence that was, by pandemonium law, the formal admission of unfitness. He walked out of the Hall of 12 Thrones. He killed himself before he reached his quarters. He did it cleanly, with the same blade he had used on his niece. Vasiri told me later that she thought he had done it because he was a proud man and proud men cannot survive that kind of public unmaking. I told her later that I thought he had done it because somewhere inside him, very deep, was a man who had loved his sister and had killed her anyway, and the canvas had reminded him of that, and he could not live with the reminder. We did not argue about it. Both could be true. Both probably were. Vasiri lived. The 6th house withdrew from the war that night. The 3rd and the 9th followed by morning. By the end of the week, 8 of the 12 houses had withdrawn, and the remaining 4 had no fleet capable of crossing the heliopause, and the invasion was over. She came home 3 months later. She did not come to us. She could not, technically, set foot on Earth without formal treaty, but she sent a transport to international waters, and she invited Copernicus and the Stavanger team aboard, and we went. The transport met us 100 kilometers off the California coast at sunset. It was a small ship by Pandemonium standards, about the size of an old aircraft carrier, and it had been painted, for our benefit or perhaps for hers, in the colors of the 6th house, which turned out to be a pale gray-green and a deep oxblood, the colors of a coastal village at dusk. The honor guard that met us at the airlock did not carry weapons. This was, Copernicus murmured as we passed them, the first time in the recorded history of the Pandemonium that an honor guard had received foreign envoys unarmed. We were being shown something. We did not yet know what. She was thinner. She had a scar across her cheek. She walked with a slight favoring of her left side. She was wearing Pandemonium robes, formal ones, the color of new copper. In her hands she carried a folded jacket. She walked across the deck of the transport. She stopped in front of me. She held the jacket out. "Lieutenant Vega, I return your covering. The debt is, I cannot say discharged. I can say held and held with gratitude." I took the jacket. It was clean. It had been mended. The bullet hole in the shoulder had been patched with a piece of obsidian-colored cloth, sewn in tiny, careful stitches that I knew, without being told, she had done herself. The name patch TOMEI was still there. Around it, in stitches the same color as the patch, she had embroidered a second name. It read Vega. And then below both names, in stitches of a third color, the color of new copper, she had embroidered a third name. I could not read it. I did not need to. It was her mother's. I held the jacket. I did not say anything for a long time. Then I said, "Thank you." She said no. She said, "Thank you." I have the jacket still. I do not wear it. It hangs on a hook by the door of the house I live in now, in a fishing village on the Pacific coast of Honduras that Tomas would have recognized. Sometimes, when the wind comes off the water, I take it down and I hold it, and I think about 3 names stitched into a piece of canvas. A Honduran fisherman's son, an Albuquerque pitcher who could not find the strike zone, and a queen of the 6th house of the Pandemonium Imperium, and I think about how a war ended because of a coat. People ask me sometimes how we won. They expect me to say something about Stavanger, about the Omicron, about the Mecha Oni I shot through the head from 3 kilometers offshore. I tell them the truth. I tell them we won because I gave a girl a jacket. I tell them we won because the jacket was already bloody when I gave it to her, and it got bloodier on her, and a room full of horned aliens who did not understand a single thing about Honduran fishermen or Albuquerque pitchers understood, perfectly, what blood on cloth means. I tell them we won because a janitor named Mr. Park covered a stranger with the nearest piece of fabric, and the fabric happened to be mine, and the stranger happened to be a queen. I tell them we won because Tomas Tomei, who I never met when he was alive, who I have only ever known through a jacket and a song, was the kind of man whose canvas could absorb 3 lives and still hold its shape. I tell them we won because of the small things, the stubborn things. The things humans do without thinking, covering a stranger, throwing a curveball, humming a song, refusing to leave a chained woman in a vault when the math says you have to, giving away a coat that you swore you would never wash and never lose and never part with, because the girl in front of you needs it more than you do. I tell them, that's the secret. That's the whole secret. The pandemonium had ships the size of Manhattan and reactors that burned suns and emperors who had not lost a single combat in 80 years. We had a coat and the kind of stubbornness that puts a coat on a stranger. That was enough. Pitcher's mound, strike looking. Sky tanker's home,